All right, we're going to start. Hi everyone, and welcome to another live session from the series Engineering Qualification Validation in Australia. And in this live session number 126, which means that every week for the last 126 weeks, I am here every week talking about a subject related to the validation process and also about other subjects related to engineering. But first, for those that don't know me, my name is Gerson Ida, and I'm the founder of the website www.engineersinaustralia.com, a website that I created to share content of value and useful information to help you in your journey to validate your engineering qualification in Australia. And I also share information about workplace health and safety, environmental management, day-to-day of engineering in Australia, and about professional engineering recruitment. And also, if you haven't joined my Telegram group yet, you can use the link that I'm going to copy and paste in the comments. And Telegram, for those that don't know, it's a messaging app. Looks like WhatsApp, but in my opinion, much better because it doesn't really have any algorithm, and the message that I send in there, it goes to everybody. So I'm going to paste in YouTube, and thanks Geraldi for giving me the feedback that you can hear me okay in YouTube. Those ones on Instagram, can you guys hear me all right? And I'm going to paste in Facebook. What's happening in Facebook? I think it's all good. I'm going to paste there in Facebook. And why is it important for you to join my Telegram group? I've got almost 800 members, and I post the PDF of this live session. I'm going to be posting in this group. And also, if you're interested in the free workshop Engineering Qualification Validation that's starting in December, the 5th of December, 10 a.m. Brisbane time, you can register for free. And you just need to use this link as well. Just going to paste this link. And we will be starting. All right, so let's get down to the business now. And I'm really happy to be here to share my experience in the engineering qualification validation process. And tonight we're going to talk about reference letter. Oh, sorry, there's a fly here annoying me. Why is it necessary to have a reference letter? As you may or may not know, the reference letter is part of your validation process, especially if you are applying under the migration skills assessment and through the CDR pathway, the competency demonstration report. So why is it necessary to have a reference letter? If you read already the Migration Skills Assessment booklet, then you know that Engineers Australia, in the MSA booklet, Migration Skills Assessment booklet, you will need to provide documentary evidence of your work experience. And what do they mean about documentary evidence? For those applying under the competency demonstration report and also the migration skills assessment, it means that you need to provide a reference letter. And why do they require that as a documentary evidence? Remember that to prove your competency, you need 3 pieces of evidences, and the reference letter is one of them. So where your supervisor or former supervisor will confirm that you have done those things that you say that you did in your career episode. And I mentioned about the PDF. So I'm just going to quickly show you how the PDF is going to be. So that's the PDF there. Well, that's a Word document that I will make as a PDF. and I'm going to tell you soon how you can get hold of this PDF. So, and the information will be here. Obviously, I spent some time to prepare for these live sessions, and I prepare my notes, and the notes then become my PDF. So why is it necessary to have a reference letter? So the dot points are there. And also, just going to get my notes back. And so the first question is, why is it necessary to have a reference letter? And the second question is, when is it necessary to have a reference letter? Because under the migration skills assessment, there are different pathways. And some of the pathways you don't need a reference letter, but if you're writing career episodes, which means you're doing under the CDR pathway, Competency Demonstration Report, and if you have based your career episode on a professional engineering experience, then you must provide a reference letter from the employer. Because you've got to remember that when you're writing your report, you're saying that you did those things. But that's you saying. And Engineers Australia, they need confirmation from your employer. So your employer can confirm that you actually did those activities that you mentioned in your career episode. So that's why it's necessary, and that's when it's necessary. When you are basing your career episode on a professional engineering experience that you did. And what is important and not important to be in your reference letter? I'm going to start with what is important. So what are the things that are important? If you're using work experience, then you need to have a reference letter. So that's very important. It's a must. Also, your reference letter, also important, it must be on the company's letterhead. Those ones from Brazil, and in Portuguese, it's papel timbrado da empresa. So if you're providing a reference letter, it cannot be just on a blank sheet of paper. You gotta have on a company letterhead. Also, very important, it must state your title or position that you occupied. Also, it must have your commencement and termination dates of employment. So date, month, and year that you start your job and when you finished your job. If you're using a current employment, obviously you won't have the termination date. Also very important to be in your reference letter, it must have at least the 5 main duties that you performed. And also it must be signed and dated by your employer. And who in your company can sign your reference letter? It can be your boss or your former boss, your supervisor or former supervisor. And also can be the human resources department or even the director, somebody in the company, obviously, that knows that you work there. And if Engineers Australia, they want to contact and confirm some information, obviously they'll be able to confirm those information. And also, if you're applying for RSEA, the Relevant Skilled Employment Assessment with Engineers Australia, in your reference letter, then your salary, and if you're working full-time or part-time, is very important. It's a must, actually, if you are applying for RSEA. And now I'm going to tell you how you can get hold of this PDF. So that's a PDF that I'm going to prepare. Well, I prepared already, and you will be able to get hold of it. So when it's necessary to have the reference letter, the things that are important and the things that are not so important. So how you can get this PDF? You can get this PDF if you go to my, you don't need to go now, but if you go to my Instagram profile, I'll show you here. My last post is about this live session. So very simple. What you need to do, you just need to like the post and then put in the comments, mark somebody that will benefit in knowing how to prepare the reference letter for the validation process. Very simple. You just need to like the post and mark somebody that will benefit. You know, I spent some time preparing this material. I think I have the right to ask you a little bit of interaction and engagement so I can share this work with you for free. So I'll wait until tomorrow. If I have some engagements, which means likes and comments, I will then post the PDF in the Telegram group. So that's why it's important for you to be part of the Telegram group. And the post will, and the PDF will be protected by a password that I'm going to release until the end of tonight's live session. So stay until the end so you'll know what the password is. So continuing, what is not so important to be in your reference letter? If you are not applying for RSEA, the Relevant Skilled Employment Assessment, then your salary and your job regime, if you are full-time or part-time, they are not so important. So if you don't really have them in your reference letter and you're not applying for RSEA, yeah, that's okay. But if you're applying for RSEA, you need to have your salary base and if you're working full-time or part-time. What else is not so important to have in your reference letter? Well, it's not so important. You don't need to have absolute everything you did in your job in the letter. So sometimes as a reference letter, when you are applying for a job, you have everything that you did in your reference letter. For the validation process, it's not so important. You don't need to have everything. What you need to have, for example, what are the things that I don't need to have? You don't need to have those activities that are not related to the 16 competencies that are required by Engineers Australia. So they are not important to have in your letter because the letter will confirm the things that you are saying or writing in your career episodes. It's when you're addressing the competencies. So if there are information there that are not required by Engineers Australia, then those information are not really important to be in your reference letter. Do you guys have any question? If you have any question, just please put in the comments. We'll just double check if there is any comment there. No comments, no questions so far. Yeah, if you have any question, just put in the comments. And the other, and I'm going to share with you soon a template. A lot of people ask me for a template. I'm going to share with you where I usually direct people to get a template for a reference letter. The other topic that I'm going to talk tonight is a very common question. Is this the same reference letter that I use when I am applying for jobs? Obviously, when you're applying for jobs, you may have a reference letter. And is it the same one? And not. The answer is no. The reference letter for the validation process is not the same as the reference letter for the job hunting. So as you probably noticed a little bit before, there are some mandatory items for the validation process as we discussed above. And what are they again? I'm just going to reinforce because it's very important, because I've seen already applicants that they had to provide some responses back to Engineers Australia because they forgot a few things. So it must be on a company's letterhead, cannot be now just a blank paper. It must state your title or position that you occupied. It must have your commencement and termination dates of employment. It must have at least the 5 main duties that you performed, and it must be signed and dated by your employer. So those are the must things, that are those pretty much mandatory things that you gotta have in your reference letter for the validation process. In a job hunting, if you don't have one item or another, they probably not going to make too much difference. But for the validation process, they're not going to approve your application if you're missing those information in your reference letter. And the difference between validation and job hunting as well: during the job hunting, your reference letter will probably be tailored to the position that you're applying for. Let's say that you're applying for a specific position, and then you ask your company for a reference letter. You're probably going to emphasize and focus the reference letter addressing the key competencies or selection criteria for the position that you are applying for. In the validation process, it's going to be different, because in the validation process, you will be describing the activities that you did in your engineering position, but you will be focusing on the 16 competencies required by Engineers Australia. You're not going to put activities and other things that you did that are not really related to the 16 competencies required by Engineers Australia. So those are the main differences between the reference letter from a job hunting process and the reference letter for the validation process. And the password for the PDF is going to be job hunting. So it's nothing to do with a reference letter, but this is going to be the password. I'm going to paste the password in the comments just as a word. People that didn't really watch the live session is not going to understand what this word is, but if you're watching this live session or even watching the replay, you will see that the password is job hunting, everything together with no space, everything in small letters as well. And now I'm going to share with you the template. Just going to check for questions. There's a question here in Instagram from Annie Paez. Yeah, thanks for your question. And Annie Paez is asking, should it have a minimum time of experience? No. If you worked, let's say 6 months, but you are using that experience in your career episode, then even you worked 6 months, you need to provide the reference letter because you are using a work experience from that company in your career episode. Another important thing that I forgot to say is that in your resume, if you put that you worked more than 12 months as an engineer in a company, you also need to provide a reference letter. So that's probably in the when, and I'm going to update my PDF. So the booklet also says that if you worked more than 12 months in a company as an engineer, you need to provide your reference letter, even if you're not using those experiences in your career episodes. But Annie Paez, no, you shouldn't really have a minimum time of experience as long as you are using that work experience. If you're not using that experience and you just worked 6 months in a company, then you don't need to provide a reference letter. But if you worked, let's say 6 months, less than a year, and you are using that experience in your career episode, then you need to have a reference letter. Yeah, no worries. So I'm going to share with you the template that I usually direct people to have a look. There's another question here from Cassio in Instagram. Thanks, Cassio, for your question. The company that I used to work with is closed. They shut the business. How can I prove my experience on reference letter? Yes, that is a very actually common question, especially I'm gathering that you are probably from Brazil. I'm also a Brazilian engineer, and I know that the situation sometimes in Brazil is like that. Companies, they open, they close, they go bankrupt, and then they have to shut the doors. And that's very common, actually. So what can you do? Well, if the company closed down, obviously you won't be able to provide a reference letter. What you can do is, if you remember the customers that perhaps when you were delivering a project or when you worked as an engineer, if you can remember who were the customers and perhaps talk to them and ask them to provide a reference letter saying that you worked as an engineer. Well, as an engineer, you were looking after that project for them on behalf of that company. Probably that could be one way to do it. Engineers Australia will probably going to ask you some other documents like your employment contract or your tax return, perhaps your social security statements, etc. But the key thing about the reference letter is that they want to make sure that the activities that you are putting in your career episode is actually confirmed by your supervisor. Or perhaps you still know your supervisor, you could ask him or her to provide you a letter and the contact details. But you can try. I'm not guaranteeing that that's going to work, but there's no other way. If the company closed down, you can't get a letter, but you can try this way. If that's going to work, it's going to be difficult. I haven't seen anyone that tried and didn't work, so depends on the assessor as well. So what I'm going to show you here, I'll see if it's going to work. Just going to share my screen. So this website here is of VetAssess. VetAssess is another assessment entity for other things, not for engineers. But they have what they call statement of service template. So when you go to this website here, and this website is going to be in the PDF. So very important, guys, go to my profile in Instagram, Gerson Ida, and like the post and write in the comments, mark somebody that will benefit in knowing how to prepare a reference letter. And then if I have likes and comments, I will then post the PDF in my Telegram group with the password job hunting. And in the PDF, they will have this website here. So when you go there, there is employment evidence. It's going to be like this. So you click on the plus here, employment evidence, and then there is a statement of service template. So when you click on that, it will show you this one. So statement of service to be provided on official letterhead. Name, full address, telephone, email, and website of the organization. Yeah, that's okay. The date that was written. Addressed to, not to VetAssess, it's going to be addressed to Engineers Australia or to whom this may concern. The certify that applicant's name was an employee and worked as, and then the title or position from the date, commencement and termination. And your name, employment. This one, they put full-time, part-time. and working many hours per week, and the monthly or annual salary was this. So this one here, it's very important when you are doing the relevant skilled employment assessment. But if you're not doing, then it's not important. But I advise you guys to, when you're asking the letter to your company, yeah, just ask this one as well, include your salary and if you're working full-time or part-time and how many hours a week, because who knows, sometimes you will need to, if you change your mind later on and you want to validate your work experience, you will need this information here. And then you're responsible for those 5 tasks, and then describe the applicant's main responsibilities, etc., etc., etc. And then the person is going to sign here, name, designation, signature, and the contact details as well. So this is very basic. Can be a little bit different. Yes, it can. I usually, to my students, I do a few things different. I ask them to include a few more things. But as a basic letter, it's okay. Any other question that you guys have? I'm just going to check my notes to see if I covered everything. Yeah, looks like, I'll just check you guys have any question there. No questions on YouTube. No more questions in Instagram, and no questions here, there. And also to remember, you guys, that not next Sunday, but the 5th of December, I'm going to start my free online workshop. And the name of the workshop is I Want to Become an Engineer in Australia. And in 1 week, is going to be an event that will last for the whole week. You will learn, and I'll teach you how you can start your validation process. So if you haven't registered yet, I'm going to paste again the link in the comments so you guys can register if you haven't registered yet. Very important when you registered, maybe you registered already. So have you registered already in the workshop? Are you attending the workshop? Perhaps you put in the comments if yes, if you did, no, if you haven't yet. But if you did, it's very important to check your email, because when you registered to the workshop, you have received then a confirmation email. If you haven't, please check your junk mail, because I sent you a confirmation email with the calendar of the events and everything, and the links to attend the opening webinar as well. So usually, or sometimes, the email goes to junk mail and then you don't see it. If it went to the junk mail box, it's very important that you create a contact with my name and my email address, so future emails, they don't go to the junk mail. All right, so I hope that this content was useful and helped you to prepare your reference letter for your validation process. And if you're watching this video and have a colleague that will benefit in learning and knowing this content as well, yeah, please share this with them. And also support my social media. If you are not following me in Instagram yet, please consider following me there. If you haven't visited my YouTube channel, if you just search Gerson Ida in YouTube, you will find me there. I've got more than 150 videos that I talk about the validation process, how you get your first engineering job here in Australia. More than 150 videos there. So consider subscribing to my channel as well. And I hope to see you next week on Sunday, 8:30 p.m. Brisbane time, where I'm going to talk about how you can prepare yourself to take the most advantage of the free workshop that's going to start on the 5th of December. So you can go to my YouTube channel now and then activate the notification so you are reminded about just pasting my YouTube channel there, so you can go there and activate the notification, so when I start the live session you will receive an email that I am live. Okay, all right, so if I don't have any other questions, I would like to thank you guys very much for your participation, and I'll see you next Sunday, 8:30 p.m. Brisbane time. See you then. Bye bye.